what this topic of this episode is going to be about, and that is wellness versus technology, which I think has a great overlap, especially during these times and the advancements in technology that we have. We all have access to devices. We're all consumed with information. We are consumers and producers of content.
Yep.
And I think it's important to touch on this and have a discussion about and addressing what problems there are, your views on it, questions that I have related to the wellness aspect and how it affects health with technology, and some tips on how we can discipline ourselves and things that we can do to keep our health and wellness as healthy as possible. Welcome everyone to this next episode of a podcast between Barry and myself. So Barry, if you just quickly give yourself an introduction, I think you'd be better at doing that.
Good to be with you again, Karl. Barry Lee Cummings here from Beat the Cyberbully. So we're doing a lot of work in the digital field when it comes to awareness around cyber safety, cyberbullying, anything to do with your online reputation, social engineering, and your overall well-being in the digital space.
Excellent. Yeah, good to have you on board. And I'm a friend of Barry's, so just put that out there. We've had several conversations in the past with recordings on your industry and your interests and what you specialize in. And I find it particularly interesting because it resonates with a lot of stuff that I'm doing. With wellness versus technology, why are they important to have this conversation?
Well, I think it's really important because we have to strike some sort of balance when it comes to this. There's a huge movement within us as people at the moment around healthy living, sustainable living, and that all comes about from balance. But with the advent of technology and social media and everything that's going on, we've lost that completely. And we have to differentiate between generations here. That my generation, then my parents' generation, then we've got my kids, and we've got the millennials and the zennials and everybody in between. And depending on who we are and how old we are, the impact of technology on our life is slightly different. And that is having a very different impact on what we perceive then as wellness also. And the topic of wellness, of mental well-being, these are topics that, in my opinion, you even go back 10 or 15 years, they weren't really being talked about as freely as they are now. And it was almost seen as a taboo subject, especially mental awareness or mental health or mental illness. But now what we're starting to see is that technology is having an impact on that. It's having an impact on our children's mental health. It's having an impact on our mental health. And even though we're not aware of it sometimes, because a lot of us have just fallen into this routine, and it's normal to spend 8 hours a day on the phone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've, referring to what you said about the 10 years ago, I think we have that testing period, which is very important when it comes to stuff that we're implementing into society, especially with technology in all aspects, with the dangers of it and just generally the unforeseen things that we don't know. So back then, I think we were just excited. We have technology. There weren't really those questions coming up. We weren't really seeing the direct impact it was having, because you've got that period of time to see things pan out and use that as a testing period, so to speak.
Definitely. And that's so true for what the impacts of social media and technology are on children, for example. So if you go back 10 years to kids that were born 10 years ago, only by them having 10 years of exposure to this do we now have the data to be able to say, you know what, there's some serious implications of a young person having so much screen time. And here's the evidence. This is what's happened to the human brain. And, there's lots of research and data now. But of course, that wasn't available 10 years ago because we didn't have those people at that age to be able to test it on. And this is part of the scary bit as well, because we're in a very unknown period. And there's the only way for us to find out the impacts of some of the stuff that's happening to us is to wait. And see in another 5 years' time, when we are then looking back and looking at, well, this is a human brain 5 years ago, and this is of a 16-year-old, and this is a 16-year-old's brain now, and wow, this part of the brain has effectively disappeared. This part of the brain is expanded massively. We're also seeing in society, higher levels of anxiety, of depression, of loneliness, of all of these things that potentially are being impacted by the technology, but we can't predict it. We can only, in retrospect, looked at, oh, wow, maybe it wasn't such a good idea to have allowed my 4-year-old or 5-year-old or 6-year-old to have an iPad or a tablet or a smart device and let them just sit on it ungoverned for 7-8 hours a day.
Because we don't see what the consequences are, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you think, well, even without having the consequences, is it a good idea to have a young person staring at a screen for 7 or 8 hours? Maybe not. But now we also have to take into consideration that there is no other choice, because with what's happening globally and with lockdown and pandemic and everything, schooling is now online. And so whether we like it or not, our children have to look at a screen for an extended period of the day to do their work, to learn and to be in attendance of the lectures and so forth. So we're in a transitionary period because everything is changing once again. But what we are seeing now is, because of this change, there's a bit much brighter light being shone on the digital space, on the technology, on the impact of having young people spending so much time online, and that's where we're getting some learning from that. And again, as soon as the information becomes available, that's when we then have to take that information and action it, and that's where we want to make sure that we're able to do that. But we can only do that if we're aware of what's going on.
What's going on, exactly, yeah. And that's why I think that this is a very important time, because now we are in a position where we have a collective amount of data that we are researching and studying and seeing the impacts of. And I can refer to myself, like in the wellness space, where I'm teaching people meditation and self-awareness and how to sort of be more in tune with your body. And technology seems to be affecting that a lot with the screen time and the impacts that the technology has that we have access to, and that's not to mention the electromagnetic frequencies that these devices give off that affect the brain, if you're looking at it from my perspective. So the human body gives off frequencies. There are energies that are working within the human bodies that we don't know that much about yet. I mean, the Eastern practices have taught me a lot in relation to that, and the technology does have an impact in that sense. And now we're in a prime time, I think, to use that data and figure out what can we do. And I think that's why we're here today, to sort of explore some of those possibilities.
Well, definitely, because I think, in your line of expertise around that wellness, is that what the technology seems to be doing is taking us further and further away from that connection with ourselves. The fact that we're all operating at a frequency, we're all vibrating at a certain frequency, and that's why we see what we see and we feel what we feel. And we're not consciously aware that smart device right here, or these things in my ears right now, are emitting a frequency that might be playing with will be interacting with me vibrating and the vibrations around me and the frequencies around me, and that will be having an effect. What that effect is still to be determined, and qualified and quantified. But I think that we don't even really consider, I know I don't, and we're talking about this because on a day-to-day basis we're also busy in doing stuff that we're not considering these things, that having this in my ear or being around technology. And again, just to put it into perspective, if you could see the setup, we've got the microphone, a laptop, lights, another computer, there's electromagnetic forces coming from everywhere.
Yeah, it's all unnatural and artificial, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's taking us away from this idea of connecting and this idea of, it's so simple, but just going outside and putting your feet on the floor, on the ground, the soil or the sand or something, and just actually having that physical connection. Because now with technology, and here obviously the heat, we don't do it, but we have to find a way to do it, or find ways of reconnecting, because the technology seems to be really pulling us away from the natural world, that we're spending more time inside. Again, current world situation dictates that, but we're not doing things that we should be doing to keep ourselves well. And even then we get into this idea of our immune system, and what we need as human beings is exposure to the elements and being outside and other people. And by staying in our boxes, we're not being healthy. from that perspective. And of course, then when we're staying in that box, what we're going to do? Well, there's a TV, there's a laptop, there's a smart device, and especially then with children, it's like, well, what do you do? Well, first of all, they have to be online, but then for adults as well, it's like, okay, well, what can I do? And so this then comes into this point you made about screen time and what you're doing, because we are going to be using screens. There's no argument about that. But what we can control is what we use those screens for. So, for example, if I am going to look at a screen, could I be doing a exercise workout? Could I be doing a high intensity HIIT workout? Could I be doing a meditation program? Could I be being guided and doing certain things using the technology? So this takes out of the equation the EMF side of things, but I'm going to be using the technology. Can I use that time productively and from a wellness perspective to help me either physically, as in my actual movement, or mental wellness as well, that calming
to your
of the
benefit,
mind,
right?
And, focus and the ability to actually do that. Because I'd say probably 12 months ago, 18 months ago, the topic of screen time was really hot and everyone was talking about it. Even back then I said, I understand that, but give it another 2 years and this will be a moot point, because screens will be everywhere. I had no idea obviously about COVID, but I knew that the technology was going to move forwards to get us to a point where everything's a screen, that we won't have to do Zoom calls like this by setting up a device to do it, because we'll have a little heads up display where we can do that. We'll be looking at a screen, and then every glass pane will be a screen that can deliver certain type of information to us depending on who you are and what information is available about you already.
Well, it's interestingly inevitable, wouldn't you think?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's this idea of managing screen time is the wrong focus. We need to manage what we do when we are on a screen.
So
that's where you can make a difference. Yeah, absolutely. Discipline and balance, because
balance.
You're going to use it for. Go on.
Yeah, balance is something that, and I use the word fight because I feel like it is something that I am fighting with. It is a battle with the technology that's pulling us away from the thinking mind. Technology is essentially something that we're like looking at a screen, whether it's from a TV, your laptop, or your smart device, your phone, or anything, whatever it is that you're looking on there for, like a movie, a Netflix, or you're on social media or whatever. It's a retreat from reality. I mean, that's the way I see it. And for me, when I do put myself into that space, it is a retreat from the norm and the reality, and away from the pain of what this real life can actually give you. And that takes you away from thinking. You become a non-thinker, and then you're consuming this information. So that's a battle that I'm fighting quite a lot with teaching meditation, because meditation in its essence is bringing yourself inwards, exploring the inner world and controlling your mind, and having some control over your thoughts at least. And thoughts are very, very important to be able to make these decisions, to be able to discipline yourself and decide what to do with technology and other things, of course. But in this specific topic with technology, when should I look at the screen, for how long, for what benefits, and then put it down, and having a good understanding and knowledge and awareness of the dangers of the technologies with the EMF and the screen time alone, and the information that's out there on the internet, and the other effects that could be damaging, like cyberbullying and stuff like this. So it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are on what directions we could go in to live a healthier life with having technology still there, without thinking, let's just get rid of it, because let's face it, that's never going to happen anytime soon.
It's not going to happen. We're going to be moving into a more technologically advanced world, and the kind of things that we'll be utilizing are going to change. But I think that coming back to something you said there, is that the big thing we have to be aware of is that for some people, you look at it as a retreat from reality into this digital world. But for a lot of people, that digital world is reality.
Wow.
Because they've shifted, and so the idea of spending time on Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat and responding to negative comments and giving in negative comments and seeing the kind of content that's being put out there, that's normal. That is reality. And we've gone to this 180 where the idea of going outside and doing something, that's weird, because they've been drawn into the cocoon of the digital technology, because they can get everything they think they need from these devices. And we've talked about this at length, because with the internet and social media, you can go out there and find a ton of evidence to support that your way of thinking is the right way of thinking. And you get into that echo chamber where everything you're saying, you say, I am right. This is the right thing. I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing for me and my family and all of this kind of stuff. Because everything I see out there is telling me, yes, you're doing the right thing. But of course, you are putting that out there to get that back.
Absolutely. So the effects of that essentially could cause things like self-doubt and depression and anxiety and all these other mental health issues just from what you said. So now we're sort of diving into the effects of using these devices and the technology that's there.
Yeah, definitely, because it is having a negative impact on a lot of people because of how long they're spending on it and what they're doing on it. And this goes right back to the whole idea of how do we move forwards? Well, it is about finding the balance of using these tools. And this is perhaps the real takeaway, is the conscious realization that these are all tools. And therefore, tools can be used in different ways. And in this society that we live in, some people choose to use tools for good, and some to use them for bad. You can use a hammer to knock in a nail and create a beautiful treehouse. You can use a hammer to kill someone. It's the tool. The hammer didn't change. How you decided how to use it. Yeah, and that's where we come in as the human element, because we decide, how long am I going to spend on here? What am I going to look at when I'm on here? What are my children going to look at when they're on here? How long do they get to spend on here? And now the technology has got to the point where we realize the potential dangers of this. And so whilst the technology is there, there's also other parts of the technology that will allow us to balance that time. And it comes back to this word of balance, about understanding that, okay, it probably isn't a good idea to spend 8 hours a day on a screen. Now, our children are having to spend a certain amount of time on the screen because of schooling, but for us, again, as adults, we're also spending so much time working. Our work revolves around screens. If you're creating content, you're looking at a screen. If you work in an office, you're looking at a screen. If you're an accountant, you're probably looking at a screen in Excel. Screens and technology have become such a part of our working life. That means that when we leave that working time, and that's also a debatable conversation, because when does work end in this day, 2020? Because the devices have made us so connected, we're constantly able to pick up emails and be contacted on WhatsApp by our clients and by other people. So this idea of disconnecting is becoming harder and harder to do, which is why I think it's so important to find a way to do it, because it's essential. We need to be able to do that. And so that's when it comes back to this idea of, well, if you're going to be looking at a screen, set time limits of how much time you're going to spend on it. And this comes back to business 101 and productivity. We as humans, our brains, we can't focus really for longer than 35 to 40 minutes anyway. So if we're doing a task, focus on that task, have a timer there for 40 minutes, do what you're doing, whether it's email, whether it's spreadsheets, whether it's cold calls, whatever you're doing. And then at 45 minutes, stop. Take a 15-minute break, go walk around, do something, do something else, go make yourself a cup of tea, go and get some water, just walk around and do some physical exercise, do some air squats, do something, have a break from the screen, and then you're going to come back to it. But then in the next 45-minute segment, could you, and again, this is dependent on your situation, of course, but could you potentially do a 20-minute video on mental health, or meditation, for example, something for you that you're still looking at the screen, but it's actually around your own well-being and so forth? Or could you watch your, Joe Wicks exercise video next, and yes, this on YouTube, and yes, it's on a screen, but you're not just sat there watching it, you're jumping around doing your star jumps, doing your exercise for 40 minutes, and then you take your 15-minute break, then you come back to do the next task, which is whatever it is. And people say that's just not possible in my line of work, but I suggest to those people that maybe you just haven't tried or figured out a way to make that happen. And maybe it won't be just, we can just divide my day into 45-minute sessions. But if we can start to implement small things like that, where we are getting a bit more balance, the longer we do it, the more it becomes a habit, the easier it becomes.
Well, balance is the key word. And in my field of expertise, balance is the fundamental thing that we're all trying to achieve here. And it's creating those triggers. Because essentially what we're talking about here is awareness, and to have the thinking mind to be able to create some of that awareness. And then from that awareness, we can create organization and discipline. And whether it be creating some triggers in order to remind yourself, oh, okay, I need to jump up now. I need to have a break because it's healthy for my mind. And that's again something that I teach and practice with my teachings within meditation. Is first of all, I think awareness has to be there to accomplish any of that other stuff. I mean, I'm just going to give one of my examples. I watch. My screen time is through the roof. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm a filmmaker first, and I've been doing that for years. And only recently, since the last 5 years, I've been looking into more esoteric teachings, Gnosticism, and a lot of stuff from the Far East, India, and yoga, meditation, that sort of thing. And I'm mixing the two. I'm on here with you. I'm using this technology. I've set the cameras up the same as you. You've got your microphone, your cameras, your lovely background, and it's there. So I enjoy it. Now it's getting to a point where I'm teaching the meditation aspect through this medium. So to a degree, it's also, I find myself in a lot of contradiction with what I'm doing. But in my personal life, my screen time is very, very high. I watch a lot of videos. I'm consuming a lot of information. It's educational stuff, mind. So I'm benefiting a lot from it. But it gets to a certain point where I'm now there thinking, right, my awareness is there because I have the opportunity to have some self-awareness. I know I've got to put it down, but I don't, because I want to learn more. I want to soak in more of this information, this education I'm learning. Then my eyes start hurting. I get a headache back of my head. Then I know, well, that's a trigger for sure. I need to stop what I'm doing, but I continue even more. So there are these unhealthy habits that I'm sure other people share the same or something similar.
We all do. We all do. I'm 100% that we do. And my wife does this. I've got a headache. I'm like, you've been staring at that phone for the last hour with your head like this, doing that. And the only reason you stopped is because the battery ran out. It wasn't a conscious decision to stop doing it. It's just you can't physically do it anymore. And addiction is the wrong word, as I found out recently, because addiction, it means that you can't function and do anything else. That's when you are addicted to something. But there are a lot of people who could spend 8 hours a day on social media and still somehow manage to do everything else that needs to be done. That doesn't necessarily mean they're addicted to social media, because it's not impacting their ability to do other things. But I do think that there's, and I'm not entirely sure what the word is, to be honest, but we are spending so much time on these devices because they are designed to do that. This is the other thing that we need to be consciously aware of, is that why do we watch so many YouTube videos? Well, because the algorithm is designed to show you something and you think, oh, that looks interesting, and that's the next chapter in what I'm learning, and so I'll keep doing it. What we have to be aware of is that even if you're doing it from an educational perspective, is the only way to truly learn is to implement. So by consuming all of this information, that's one thing. But if you don't implement any of this information, then you're not truly learning it. So there's a way to then balance one 45-minute video worth of learning to one 45-minute session of implementing that learning and doing what you just learned about, before we then go on to learn the next thing. Because then, and I've done this before, I've gone through a whole process of learning. And by the time I finished, I remember that last video and everything that was in it. And then I think, what did he say in that first video? I can't remember.
It's become counterproductive.
Exactly. I'm not actually learning all of that. I just learned that last little bit that I can remember. So maybe if I'd broken it down, learned, implemented. Implementation can be making physical notes or making digital notes, or then if it's a skill, going and practicing that skill and do it. And that's how we actually learn, not just through the consumption of all the information. But I say it comes back to being consciously aware that these devices and these platforms are designed to drag you in and spend more time there, because the more time you spend on YouTube, the more advertising dollars can be generated. The more time you spend in Facebook, the more advertising dollars can be generated. So it's in their best interest for us to spend a lot of time on these platforms. Yeah, absolutely. But if we're consciously aware of it, then we can choose to use YouTube as a brilliant resource for our benefit, because there's some fantastic content out there.
Which is exactly why I wanted to have this podcast with you, because this discussion alone, and for any of you that are actually listening, I'm hoping that it's creating this awareness now, because without that awareness, you are being sucked into something by design that has its interests in mind. And now having some of this awareness, you can create some disciplines and organization. Now, I'm going to use a traditional form as an example here. Like back in the day, growing up, our time was split between going out and having fun. If the weather was good back in the UK, then we would go out and have fun and get dirty, play in the mud, play in the grass, all that fun stuff. But then that would have to be divided up with, I've got to also now energize myself, have some sleep, have some breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Those would divide that time up. But the time that I am dividing from that fun time is, I would consider, and I'm sure you would agree, tell me if I'm wrong here, is healthy, because you're outside, you're in the sun, you're having physical exercise as a result of it. And then if you now fast forward to where we are now, using technology, replacing that fun time outside, the technology is taking that time, but it's not giving you those health benefits like being physical exercise and being out in the sun would do, right?
Yeah, definitely. The vitamin D element and being outside exposed to the elements is something as yet I don't see is replicated in the digital space. But the physical exercise, and this is where I do see there's a positive use for this content, because if our children are interested in gaming or they're looking at a screen, which they all are, it comes back to this idea of what are they looking at on the screen? Is it healthy for your child to spend 8 hours a day playing PUBG or Fortnite? No, it isn't. But would it be okay for them to spend half an hour playing that game or an hour playing that game? In my opinion, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. If the next hour is then, because we're locked in and we can't go outside and it's too hot, if the next hour is then spent doing a game on an Xbox or whatever, which is a physical game where they are, because now you've got this whole interactive ability that you don't have to just sit there like this, is that you can purchase games and you can have those games where you as parents can be involved, and that you're physically stood up and you're jumping around, you're dancing, you're doing all of these things. So you are still getting the physical benefit from it, but you're still using a screen. And this is what it comes down to. It's the idea that the screens are there to stay. They're not going away. How we choose to use them, that's the thing that we can control. But it takes a bit of discipline. It takes the awareness that we should be doing it. And then it takes a lot of practice to keep doing it, because just like everything else, and again, it's not like I am the perfect example of this. In my life, just like you've said, I don't do all the time what I'm supposed to do. I know that having a giant burger with fries is not a good idea, but I still do it sometimes.
It tastes good.
And but if I did it every day, then that's perhaps a bigger problem. But I also
that's where the balance comes into it. That's where balance should, and I think that's the underlining thing with my teachings is the balance, because your example there with, the hamburger, the fast food, it tastes great. I'll have it today, maybe tomorrow a push. Every day, twice a day for the next month, that's out of balance for sure there. And the same can connect here with technology. So,
yeah.
I mean,
yeah, definitely.
We're discussing the points here on the effects of the technology it has, and we have come across some great ones. I have to ask you the question: do you meditate?
I'm just starting to, actually. Interestingly, it's been on my agenda for a long time, because since lockdown, well, actually probably a bit before that, just with running a couple of businesses and trying to figure out what I want to actually do. It's very difficult with all the noise going on, and actually I'm half Chinese and half English, and so from the far east part of things, I've been exposed to things, but been brought up more from a Western perspective, and so there's this thing pulling me back all of the time to my mum's side and Hong Kong and Asia, and meditation has been something that has been there, like flashing away. So maybe and I tried, I downloaded an app a while back to do it, and was doing it for a little bit and noticed the difference, but I didn't do it enough to form it into a habit, and that was my mistake. And then of course
it's the practice that you're referring to, which is my point here, and why I asked you this is because you mentioned the word, we need to get into this practice and create these habits. So I mean, it's great that you have this calling, and it's very interesting that it's, you're kind of referring to it as that, and it's pulling you back towards the east, because I had that a long time ago. I mean, we could deep dive into that, but I think it'd be a bit esoteric for now. But that calling in itself, and I love the Taoist traditions, by the way. I mean, there's a lot of interest there for me from the Far East. But what is your understanding of meditation? I'm asking this because I just want to see what other people's views are on it, that aren't practicing it regularly, and what they
Sure.
understand of it and the benefits. Like, what do you understand of
Yeah.
meditation?
It will also see how far off I am in terms of why I'm thinking about this. My understanding of what meditation is the ability to quieten your mind so that you can actually focus on those things that you want to focus on, whatever that is. But with the everyday goings on, there's so much distraction and so much happening and so much thought process going on that even when you're trying to sit down and focus on something and come up with a solution, you can't always do it because there's the stuff going on in here, and then there's also the physical distractions. If you sat there and then the phone rings or somebody comes in or whatever happens, you get pulled out of that zone and you think, okay, I'll come back to that, and you come back to it and think, where was I going with that, and what was that, and the thread's gone and you can't find a way back, and then there's another million things that are then taking your attention away. My understanding of meditation is through breathing and consciously thinking about, consciously letting your mind do what it needs to do. By clearing it from a lot of clutter, you can get focus and you can start to really, okay, yeah, that would be a better way of doing it, because you've given yourself 30 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever you can give yourself to actually sit down and focus on something. And this comes back to the idea of multitasking is a myth. If you're doing 10 things at once, you're doing 10 things at 10%. So if you can actually do something and complete it, then you've got something done at 100%. But to do that, you in my opinion, you need to remove some of those things that are trying to take your attention away. And I relate this back to business all the time, because when I started doing digital and online marketing, I was being distracted all over the place because there's this shiny objects all over the internet saying, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. I'm thinking, oh yeah, I can. And I'm taking all of these things. Now I've got 5 projects. I'm trying to do 5 projects at once, and I'm not completing any of them. And the reason I found that, and I think that, is because I'm just not focusing on them. And what meditation, again, what I believe meditation will do is quieten down the noise to allow me to actually think about what is important and then make a conscious decision to move forward with that objective, whatever that is, whether it's business, whether it's health, whether it's family, whether it's what do we do for dinner tonight? Just, all of these simple day-to-day things where there's an ongoing joke, as married people, our conversations revolve around what do you want to eat, and the arguments that ensue from that, because nobody can make a decision because you want to decide on this and then this happens and the kids need that, and there's so much going on. But if you can actually figure out a way to slow things down a little bit and focus, then you can make some better decisions, or at least some decisions, because in some cases it's just about making a decision and saying, right, This is where we're going. I don't know if it's necessarily the right decision, but it feels like we should be doing this for now. And then by going down that route, we will get the data and the evidence to suggest, yes, it's the right thing, or you know what, we need to rethink this and adjust our course.
Well, you've given yourself that space and that time to do that thinking. And during that thinking time, you've created stillness, which is important to be able to make the right decisions or well thought through decisions without being driven by ego or emotion, which can lead down a very destructive path very, very quickly. So our instinctive nature, negatively inclined as it is, can take us in that direction very, very fast. And so I don't need to add to your understanding of meditation too much here, because you've hit the nail on the head. You have a very good understanding of what it is, which is great, because now we can start exploring areas of how to implement that practice to start creating some discipline, organizations into the tech world, and to keep our health levels as high as possible with that awareness that comes with it.
Yeah, well, this is why I think that the ability, because what technology is also doing is moving us so fast all the time, is that my understanding as well is that meditation would actually just put the brakes on for a minute, which I think everybody needs to do, because if you're going at 100 miles an hour all of the time, eventually something's going to give. And if we need to slow down a little bit physically and metaphorically just to be able to then make better decisions. And I personally, this is so topical because I know that right now, literally right now, that's what's happening to me, is that there's so much going on, the impacts of what's gone on, the pressures of trying to figure out how to move forward with Beat the Cyberbully and the app and the family and generating revenue and my parents elderly and the impact of that with COVID and seeing them and the kids. And there's just a million things going on. And there's a lot of time where you just think, I don't know what to do next. And I just try and focus in on, okay, well, I can control work, so I'll do that. But then that's not necessarily having the right impact on other areas. And so this is why it's so topical for me right now.
Yeah, the speed thing that you mentioned is very important, because it's almost like the allegory of the rabbit and the tortoise. You know, the race of the rabbit and the tortoise. The tortoise always ends up winning. Like, why is that? There are many different views to it, but my sort of way that I like to explain that is you can be the fastest to get to the finish line, but what are you missing along the way? You know, and if you are slowing yourself down now in this world that we're in now with the accessibility to the technology that we have, it is sped things up so fast, and our thoughts cannot keep up with that. And then you have all these other mental health issues that come along with that. So to slow your life down through meditation practice can contribute towards your wellness and your overall life. So changing some habits. So let's talk about now. I mean, we've discussed some aspects of the effects of technology from a negative aspect, but also we've touched on some bits that we can, discipline and organization are arrows in the right direction. So what kind of, with the technology we have available, we have our smart devices, right? We all have one of these in our pocket. We have laptops, desktops. Most of us, our work revolves around technology. Whether you're doing a desk job, you have a computer, or, if you're in a car, the technology has advanced so much in cars and, et cetera. Whatever your work life is, there's technologies around us all the time, as you well know. So what sort of things can we incorporate into our personal lives with the technology we have on us on a daily basis to create a healthier space?
Well, I think there's some very simple things that we can do when it comes to distancing ourselves from the technology physically, again, but also to give ourselves a break, because we are online and on in front of a screen so much of the time. It becomes even more important for us to try and find some time to step back from it. And so this is about, first of all, using things like screen time management software built into some of our devices, but you can also purchase apps and whatnot that will effectively shut down your phone after a certain period of time. So on iPhone, for example, you can set. Yeah, so I use it for on a few within iOS. There's screen time, and you can add downtime, so that, say, from 10 o'clock, you pick which apps are no longer available. You can effectively shut your phone down. But what you have to do is you have to have the discipline to not just then turn it off, because it's your phone. You can have that in place, and then you're saying, oh, it's 10 o'clock and everything's going off. I'll just log in and turn it off. And you think, well, that's kind of defeating the object. So it comes back to... So you're going to have to be strict with yourselves. Yeah, exactly. You have to take some control. The software can only do so much. But it's good habit to get into of utilizing this, because you can apply it to your whole phone. You can apply it to specific apps. So, for my wife applies it to Pinterest, because she knows she spends a long time on Pinterest. And so after a certain period of time per day, it locks her out of it. And I would say 7 times out of 10, she doesn't then just go and turn off the app downtime and go back into it. She does genuinely try and do something else. So using that kind of technology to help you manage what you're doing. The other great thing, again, it's iPhone related, because is that if you tap the home button 3 times, is that you can turn the screen from color to black and white. And there's some evidence to support that it becomes less attractive to you then, because it's not, oh, look at this. You're not so tempted to pick it up every 5 seconds and look at what's going on. So that's one of the things that we can do to help us stop just picking the thing up all of the time. We've got to the point where we're not picking it up because there's an alert or something. We're picking it up because it's habit. We're looking at it. There aren't any alerts. It didn't vibrate. It didn't go off, but we're still picking it up. Vibration, right? Yeah, and you think, oh, okay, yeah, didn't miss anything. And what iOS does is it shows you how many times you pick it up in an hour, and it's quite interesting to see. That can't be true. It measures how long you're spending on apps as well. And so again, turn it on and just get clarity that you can say, you know what, I'm all right. I don't spend that much time on it. And this is the proof in the pudding. But even when that was available and I started doing it, I was shocked how long I
Right.
was spending on it.
I know it's unbelievable, and like you're referring to like the habitual nature of like picking up the device and those phantom vibrations. I mean, I had it many times, and then suddenly realized actually my phone isn't in my pocket; it's in my bag or on my desk. That's weird. And so, I mean, the brain is a fascinating thing, and it's something I study a lot in my field, like with meditation, to understand how the mind works as much as possible is important. To also to be able to teach what I know. And it just shows one thing, that if we put ourselves into these habits, it shows that we can program the mind. The mind is a programmable instrument. So if it's programmable in that way, by accident, it's no fault of our own. The technology's just been there. It's landed on our laps essentially, and the habits have created it from the excitement of having these and what's available to us. But we can also reprogram our minds the other way. And that again, I refer to meditation and how we can reprogram our minds to change whatever habits we want to. And I think to remove those habits of picking up the phone all the time, we can just generally change our habits back to something that's a little bit more, that's healthier and balanced with the screen time that we use. So that black and white option, that reminds me of the blue light situation that we have with phones. And obviously during the daytime, as it is now, naturally we have blue light, but that's during the day. That's natural.
Yeah.
And then we have blue light emitting from these devices. And when we sat there in bed or lie down in bed looking at these devices, I mean, just tell me what your understanding of what problems can be caused from that and how we can reduce that.
So yeah, the point that you've made there that's so important is that we're exposed to the blue light during the day a ton more than we do get from these screens, but during the day, which is when we as a human being are supposed to be awake. Our circadian rhythm is we get up when the sun comes up, we go to sleep when the sun goes down. And we do that because once it goes dark, our body starts to generate melatonin, which we then help us go to sleep. What's shown is that blue light from these devices stops, it effectively interrupts that rhythm and suggests to us as a human being, well, it's not time to go to sleep yet, so don't start creating melatonin and stay awake. And so we started to see a lot of people having problems with going to sleep when they're using their phone. The last thing they do at night is they're sat in bed and they're just scrolling through social media or whatever they're doing, and then they put it on charge right next to their head, and then they try and go to sleep, and for some reason they can't go to sleep because they're wired, or it must be because I'm thinking about the day, or I've got stuff on my mind or whatever. But in many cases, because physically the chemical reaction in your body hasn't started to help you go to sleep, because you've fooled your body into thinking it's still light out there. So the idea of blue light has spawned a whole industry of glasses and things like that to help prevent and help stop this happening. In my opinion, and having spoken to a few people that have bought these things, they don't seem to have the effect that they are sold on. Other than that, if you are looking at a screen, for example, if you're a graphic designer and your job is around looking at a screen all day, every day designing, if you wear these glasses, your eyes feel less tired at the end of the day. But for us as the general public, is that, in my opinion, again, is something that we talk about at Beat the Cyberbully, there is no reason, absolutely no reason, for a smart device to go into the bedroom at night. I agree. There isn't one. We don't need to do that. We will make up all excuses. And again, I know that, and yet what's at the side of my bed? My smartphone. But there is no reason for that smartphone to be there. And actually, what we'd be talking about in our family as well is implementing some of the things that need to happen. And so that's putting the smartphone on a charging station outside of the bedroom. At this point in time, I've got very young kids, so they're asleep before we go to bed, so they're not seeing that side of things. But I'm also very aware that kids in general are looking at what's going on and seeing. So if mum and dad are consistently taking their phone or a smart device into bed, and you've got older kids and they're seeing this happening, or they see you coming out of your bedroom in the morning with that device, and they've got a device, then it's going to be an obvious conversation for them saying, well,
they're learning from their teachers.
Phone. Yeah. I want my phone in my bedroom. You're like, no, you can't. And then they're going to turn around and say, but you do it. Yeah. And again, it becomes one of those situations where do as I say, not as I do. But actually what we should be doing is modeling the appropriate behavior, so that they're just
leading by example, right?
Yeah. It's normal not to have that device in the bedroom. And then that just completely removes the opportunity for the blue light to be emitted at the wrong time of day to stop you from going to sleep. And that's the simple solution.
Absolutely. So what you're saying here is essentially we shouldn't be having these devices. I mean, instinctively, we kind of know this, and anyone that's listening in or watching, kind of, you know this anyway. You know it's disrupting something, but yet, and I'm guilty too. My phone ends up in my room next to my bedside table on a regular basis, and when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I knew I should have put that outside. But when I do actually do that, I feel a huge difference. And I do think that has something to do with the electromagnetic frequencies the phone gives off and how it can disrupt your brainwaves and your energy fields and so on. So to have that device outside, not only from an energetic perspective, can be more healthier for you, but you're less inclined to pick it up first thing in the morning and look at it and start filling your head with all the daily stuff too early. You know, you haven't even had breakfast yet. You've probably not even leaned over and kissed your loved one good morning or anything like that yet, and you've gone straight to the phone, and the health effects that can impact you with. And not only that, with the circadian rhythm, you know, you go to sleep when the sun goes down, or used to. I mean, we're all stay up past sundown a lot these days without a device, but with that device in our hands and in the bedroom, it's influencing us to stay on there for longer. And then these very platforms, which you mentioned earlier, are designed to keep you glued to it, to keep you scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And like I said earlier, I'm focused on one piece. I know I have to put it down now. I know I've got to go to bed, and then I continue. 10 minutes later, I realize to myself, I thought this 10 minutes ago, and why haven't I still done it? So you've got those platforms, those very platforms that are designed to keep you glued in. At that time, you should be winding down. And the chemical imbalances that I know that creates inside your mind is very, very destructive. It has such a huge health impact on your well-being overall. And then that can lead to certain diseases and you know, the way you think, you become tired the next day. So your reactions to certain topics or certain things that people are doing around you aren't normal anymore.
Oh yeah, no, it's you get knocked at things that that previously you wouldn't have really had that reaction. And this is also a big part of it, is that because we are interrupting our sleep, we are not getting enough sleep as human beings, which is probably one of the worst things that we can possibly do for all manner of different reasons. There is a reason why sleep deprivation is used as a torture technique, because it messes with you. So if but we're voluntarily going to bed later, making it harder for ourselves to go to sleep. And then if you've got kids, you've got no choice, but especially, you know, a little one wakes up at 5:30, and so you've got to get up at 5:30. And if you somehow manage to prolong your evening until midnight or 1 o'clock, again, like last night, it was pretty much 1 o'clock before I went to bed, because I was working because I didn't have enough time to do it, but I was working on a screen, and then I go to bed. And then of course, luckily my wife deals with the youngest at 5:30, 6 o'clock, but then our 2.5-year-old is up at 6:15, and so that's my job. And so then I'm thinking, that's a big problem. I'm not getting enough sleep. And then how I react to scenarios and how I react to my wife and how I react to certain things, it's not always a rational response. And you think, why did I say that? And why do I feel angry about that, when actually it wasn't anything to get angry about? And sometimes I'm tired.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's even hard. Some people don't even have the capacity to think to themselves, why did I just do that? And that's not normally like me. You continue life as you would think normal, but things have changed. And it's funny, it's interesting and funny at the same time, because you mentioned voluntarily. It's almost, it's a paradox, isn't it? That it is insane in its nature, which is very interesting, because for me, it's specifically interesting because when you can give yourself that chance to create some space with meditation, you are essentially creating those particular brain waves that you would when you're in a deep state of sleep. It's theta waves. I mean, don't quote me on that. Yeah. Theta waves, which is it's a hypnotic state in itself. So when you are meditating and you can truly get into a good state of meditation and create some stillness inside, you're creating those very similar brain waves, which are key and important for well-being. recharging the body and the mind. And without that, we are having these exact effects that we're discussing now in our daily lives, or the way we react to things, the decisions we make. They're not healthy ones. And that's what we've got to sort of pinpoint here, I think, on the use of technology and take some control back of what we're doing.
I think so, and I think it's so important. Again, my personal perspective, it's so important for me to do that. From what I do from Beat the Cyberbullies perspective, but also for my young kids, because I see the impact it has on me as a supposed grown-up who has the ability to make decisions and has some life experience on my side, and I'm struggling with it. Well, how is a toddler or a tween or a teenage brain which isn't fully developed yet? How are they supposed to deal with this? It's an impossibility unless we can start to show them and literally educate them by showing them this is how we do it. And we build those habits for them at a young age, and then they just become normal. And so then there isn't this requirement to try and change behavior. Now, I'm fully aware that there's a lot of people who have already got 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds. And so we can't go back in time when they were younger and start doing this. And so we have to take a different approach. But I really appeal to those people of young children to really start to take control of this themselves, so that they can then show the next generation and their children how this is just normal. The fact that we leave all of our stuff downstairs in the living room to charge overnight, that's just how it's done. There's no questions. There's no arguments about it. That's just what happens.
Led by the influence of the elders, and what I mean by that is us, the people that are influencing them, the very people that they're looking up to. So we need to also influence that too. So we learn from them, they learn from us, and vice versa. And which is exactly why, again, I come back to the conversation we're having here during this podcast, and I want to thank you for having this conversation, because it's creating that awareness to anyone that is listening. And I'm hoping that you have got some important takeaways from this. I mean, we can have this discussion for many, many more hours, because there are many, many aspects that we can go into. And I think that gives us grounds to create some more episodes on this if you want to. It'd be great to have you
Absolutely.
on again.
Yeah, definitely. Very happy to, because like I say, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I know some more about these things, but and being able to share that with people, that's what I've realized is what I want to do. It's what Beat the Cyberbully is about. So yeah, I'm definitely down to do some more episodes, talk about some of the other things in more detail, and just try and share the little bit of knowledge that I have around this to try and help people make some changes and be safe in the knowledge that I am a work in progress as well. I'm doing these things, I'm learning about these things, and I'm implementing them as I can, and that I'm not perfect. I'm not implementing everything I should be implementing, just like we all do. It's work in progress.
Yeah, and me too. I can say exactly the same thing, and it's exactly what my mission is as well. Is for the Mind and Body Fitness Club and the members that I've got in there, and anyone else that's coming in over time, is to create that awareness and have these discussions to benefit. And I'm also learning along the way too. I'm in no way perfect, and to be able to admit that is a good start, because it means we can have the ability to then share what we learn along the way, and anyone that's joining this journey with us and joining these conversations with us have the option to see our mistakes and share what we know in our education. So again, I want to thank you for coming on, Barry. I think it's about 1 hour. So definitely let's prepare for another episode. And for anyone that's watching or listening in, let us know what your thoughts are, any comments, any experiences that you want to share based on this topic and this discussion, and any questions that we could potentially answer in the coming episodes. So I think we should wrap up there, Barry. Thanks again for coming on.
No, thank you very much.
It's been very interesting conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look forward to doing it again very soon.
Excellent. All right. See you next time.